Yeah, Shai, according to Jeff and I guess Stephen Brunt as well, the countdown's now beginning for the exodus of John Gibbons. And I've covered the Leafs for a number of years, and I covered Ron Wilson's firing and Randy Carlyle's firing, and to an extent, both felt maybe necessary, and part of it was because of expectations and the team not meeting them. This one, if John Gibbons is on his last legs, what do you think the reaction is going to be amongst the fan base here? Because we saw what it was when Alex Anthopoulos left, and I wonder if the feeling is going to be very similar to, well, John is just a popular guy here, and no one really kind of holds him accountable for what's gone wrong this year.
I think there'll be he's always been a polarizing figure. So I think there's a portion of the fan base that sees every flaw on the field and blames it on him. And on the flip side, there's a significant portion of the fan base that's come to understand and respect what he's achieved. I mean, you can make the case quite easily and probably quite correctly he's the second most successful manager in franchise history behind Cito Gaston. I mean, Bobby Cox is in the Hall of Fame, but he didn't have anywhere near as long a tenure as John Gibbons had, and he's really become a part of the fabric of this franchise's history. So I think that there's some people who acknowledge and respect that. But look, I think John Gibbons was the manager of the past core. Those are his players. That was his strength. And I think as they transition to a younger group for the future, they're going to be looking for a different voice to hone that group for the next core. So, I think this is something that's been on the wall for a while. John Gibbons and Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro, I mean, they're different baseball people. The fact that they've gotten on this long is, to me, the biggest surprise. And I think now that the transition is coming, or it's underway, but the more substantial transition is coming, I think this is the time for them to transition to the manager's seat. And I think the general sense around the team is everyone recognizes it, whether it happens next week or it happens next month or happens at the end of the season. I think everyone understands that this is where it's headed.
Yeah, and I mean, you used the perfect word, and that's a word I would advise people to use: transition. I think that explains what's going on more than anything else. I'm not certain. If the Jays are playing 500 or a couple of games above 500, I don't even know. That to me that probably wouldn't make a difference. This is a transitional phase or transitionary phase for this team. We saw it at the trade deadline. And as you pointed out at the time, it's something we haven't gone through really in recent years. And the question now is, how do you create the culture you're going to need to create to allow Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette and Kevin Biggio and Danny Jansen and whoever comes up here? How are you going to go about creating the culture that allows them to have success? Because I would think most people would look at this team right now and say, this is probably not the perfect culture to bring these guys up in. There's some sour veterans in that clubhouse, and that's understandable. Quite frankly, I don't know how you change the culture of a clubhouse as long as you're waiting Josh Donaldson to return, because he's going to be the dominant guy in your clubhouse when he comes back.
Right, and I do think that that's why we're going to see Josh Donaldson, if he can show enough on the field, traded during the August waiver period. And if not, then I just don't see the Blue Jays extending him a qualifying offer on the possibility that he ends up accepting it. So I
have you changed, just to interrupt for a minute, have you changed your mind on that, or have you felt that way all along?
Well, initially, I think the way this Josh Donaldson season has played out, that's become a possibility. Whereas
right.
if he had the type of year you'd expect Josh Donaldson to take into free agency, we're not having that conversation. But at this point, he's probably, I don't want to say probably, but a good chance that he's looking at some sort of pillow deal where he takes a one-year contract, looks to recover, have a big season, and then re-enter free agency. And so if that's the case, if you're looking at a guaranteed $17, $18 million at a place that you like, that's a pretty good place to go and try and rebuild your value. And I think the Blue Jays want to move on from that. So that's why I say it's a possibility now. So in terms of changing the culture, that's happening, whether it's sometime this month or at the end of the season. I mean, that Josh Donaldson's departure is a when, not an if. And at that point, that's where, I think some of the space that you want to create for the young kids starts to come into play.
Jeff was mentioning bilingual ism as an asset as well as analytics as an asset. What else do you see in terms of maybe the next guy that takes the helm here, Shi? Is it going to be a guy that maybe has a stronger personality that, devoid of some leadership in the room, can really provide that?
I mean, that's certainly always an ingredient, but I think that what you're trying to strike the balance is somebody who embraces the new age in terms of analytics and thinking outside the box with sort of an old school soul. Somebody who has the baseball chops to go into a clubhouse and say, that was a horse poop kind of game. You guys got to get after it, and is able to command the type of respect that's needed in those situations when guys are starting to get out of line. So that's the really tough balance to strike. I expect that we'll hear names like Sean Casey and John McDonald. This one's a little outside the box. I don't think it's imminent, but someone like a Craig Breslau, who's a AAA for the Blue Jays right now. These are the types of guys that are being in demand a little bit right now. Of course, you're going to look at the Cleveland tree and see where there's some connections that might exist there. But I do think that that's where this team is going right now, and it makes sense for the way that this front office is built.
Yeah, and I think there are, Craig Breslau is a great name. And, I mean, there are a lot of ways to go about kind of cobbling this coaching staff together. And, we've seen that with the Boston Red Sox, where you sort of have, the Red Sox have taken the advisor's role and they've put some of their advisors in uniform, right, and given them a presence around the team, especially at home games. And I could see a guy like Craig Breslau, who, is extremely analytically inclined. I can see a guy like that factoring somehow in a staff. I can also see, and I don't, he's making a fair amount of money this year, and he's got a 2,500 acre farm in Florida, and there's no indication he wants to coach. But I can certainly see the Blue Jays talking to Victor Martinez about coming over here at some point. And you're right. You have to look at the Cleveland tree. You look at ties to Cleveland. You look at analytics, and I think I think the guy, whether or not he's completely bilingual, he has to be able to speak to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Lourdes Gurriel in their first language most of the time. I think that would be the thing. If you're deciding between two candidates, that would be the thing that I would think would tip it in the favor of one person or another. And you're right. I think it's difficult to handicap who gets this job, because I think just literally anybody with an interest could be in it.
Very, very much so. And look, this is going to be an important hire for this front office. The built-in, this is what we inherited, and we're trying to make do with what we got and the hand we were dealt. I mean, that's over now. This is starting to become their core. These are the roster decisions that they're making. These are the pieces that they're putting into place, and this is a critical one for them, because you are moving away from someone in John Gibbons, who was really able to manage very difficult clubhouses. He was able to handle difficult situations quietly, managed very different and at times clashing personalities, and try to create a cohesive whole out of that. And you remove that bastion of stability from your clubhouse, you better make sure that you're bringing in the right presence, especially when you are potentially integrating guys who have the talent to be generational players in Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette. So this is absolutely a critical hire, and you better cast a wide net to make sure you get the right guy.
Yeah, a guy that might not be part of the future, Shi, and Ken Giles. We've seen him now twice over the weekend, and we saw Osuna pitch his debut for the Astros last night. What did you make of Ken Giles' two performances, and do you see kind of maybe the beginnings of what might be maybe his second coming as a closer?
Well, I mean, the stuff is there, and if you look at his peripherals, I mean, his season just doesn't make any sense. I mean,
Right.
this guy, I mean, as someone who's got a walk rate of 1 per 9 innings or under 1 per 9 innings with 9 or 10 strikeouts per 9 innings, I mean, that's just sheer dominance. And, the stuff is unreal. I mean, the guy's fastball averages 98 miles an hour. His slider is ridiculous. I mean, that's a pretty good combination. So there's, the Blue Jays get that on track. He's at worst, a dominant closer for them, but potentially a trade asset, and you can maybe make up some of what you lost on Roberto Osuna by dealing away Ken Giles down the road. But I think right now the Blue Jays have to just get him right, finish out the season with him, and I think that'll be the goal. And then what happens after that happens after that.